So I'm going to ask you, Chris Canty, here on the Rich Eisen Show, the same question I asked DeMarcus, where he had 9 seasons of the 28 in a row that the Cowboys have not made the NFC Championship game. You had half of that before you moved on to the Giants and then eventually the Ravens, because this is essentially, even with what we saw against Cleveland and how impressive they were, my essential take was great stuff. They deserve the kudos for doing that, but whatever. Like, let's see it when it all comes down to it. When you were a young player there in Dallas, did you know of how long it had been and how each mounting year just adds the pressure? Because it was only about 10 years since the streak had begun when you first arrived. I'm just wondering how much this is in the frontal or back lobes of the current Dallas Cowboys right now. Chris?
Rich, I didn't even think about it when I got to Dallas. I was a 4th-round pick. I was just trying to do enough to stay in the league, stay on the team. And Bill Parcells did a really good job of keeping everybody focused on the task at hand and not looking too far down the road. So I don't think a lot of people that were on those teams from 2005 through 2008 paid much attention to it. Now, certainly when we made the playoffs in 2006 and 2007, there was a lot of chatter. And when you have 13 Pro Bowlers on a team, there are going to be expectations. When you're the number 1 seed in the NFC, there are going to be expectations. But I will say this. I think when we start talking about the pressure and the expectations in Dallas, we have to look at the owner, Jerry Jones, and what he does in terms of impacting the autonomy of the head coach and empowering him and the leaders within that locker room in order to set the agenda for the team. And the one thing that I will say is that for all of the good things that Jerry Jones does, it feels like in a lot of his negotiations and a lot of the bluster and a lot of him stirring the pot, he undermines the head coach and the leadership structure on his own football team. And that doesn't necessarily lend itself to getting the best out of your team when you need it the most. If you think back to when they lost that playoff game against the Green Bay Packers last year, team leader Tank Lawrence said after the game that they were too burnt out, that they didn't have the energy to be ready for that playoff game, that kind of intensity. Well, the only thing that I can take away from that is that cauldron that Jerry Jones creates with all of the headlines impacts in ways on the team as they go through the regular season. So again, I think a lot of the issues that we're seeing from the Dallas Cowboys, they're not for the lack of having talent. Will McClay, their senior personnel director, does a great job of being able to buy the groceries. It's about the culture that's in the building. And unfortunately, it's not the head coach. It's not the leadership structure within the team. It's Jerry Jones setting the culture. And that's the only common denominator that can explain the 28-year NFC Championship game drought.
Interesting. So let me ask you to put a little bit more meat on that right there, Chris, because I'm sure there are some fans hearing you say what you just said that would push back to say Tank Lawrence is a lead pipe wielding professional player, as are the rest of the Dallas Cowboys, many of whom are very well compensated, and playoff rubber meeting the road. How do you not find the energy within you? How do you not overcome whatever cauldron has been cooked up like it's go time? So why would that happen is what I'm saying. Like would you say the cauldron being created by Jerry Jones does defray somebody's ability to dig deep?
Rich, I couldn't tell you. I'm not in that locker room. All I can go on is what the players say. And when Tank Lawrence says something, I'm going to pay attention to it, especially when it's a player as veteran as he is, saying he was too, quote unquote, burnt out to be ready to go in a playoff game when you're competing for a championship at home versus what was the youngest playoff team in the last half century. So I was surprised to hear that. But when I take those comments and we start looking at some of the shortcomings for the Dallas Cowboys over the last 3 years, where they've had 12 wins in each regular season, where they've lost 2 of the 3 playoff L's that they've taken at home on their own field, I have to look at what's going on at the top of the organization. They always say a fish rots from the head down, and that's exactly what it feels like down in Dallas. Now, again, Jerry Jones is a wildly successful businessman. He's taken a $140 million investment and turned it into a $10 billion business. So it's hard to sit here and say that Jerry is doing it wrong. But when it comes to creating the kind of culture that will allow your team to contend at a championship level, there is something that is missing within the culture of the Dallas Cowboys. There is that intangible that just isn't there. And I point to the little things within the margins, and those little things happen to be some of the big headlines that Jerry Jones creates around his team.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.